Excuse me.
I want to say thanks for giving me the opportunity to bring my second part of my presentation on servant leadership to you today. It is a good follow-up to the first part because it speaks a little bit more about how you implement the role of a servant leader in your practice, and I think by the end of it you'll have a little more complete picture. For anybody who might have missed the first part, you can revisit it on our website at TLC Academy. It is there, and you can go and see it there. And I will say that even if you choose not to do that, I think after today's presentation you still will walk out of this room with enough information about servant leadership to have a pretty good understanding of what it is. So with that, I'd like you to know my goals for today. I want to inform you about the principles of servant leadership as I understand them in a simple and a straightforward manner. And the second thing I want to do is to try to lay out a simple process so you can use these principles and implement them in a way that allows you to be a service leader in whatever setting you are in, whether that's your home, your church, an organization in the community, or TLC as a body. I gotta give you my disclaimer again because it's important that I say it out loud. The principles of servant leadership and the core ideas for this presentation are not my own. Although I believe that I have striven to practice servant leadership throughout my entire life in many settings. I have served as chairman of many boards, as the founder of and the executive director of a nonprofit organization, as a nurse supervisor and director of nurses, to name a few. In this presentation, I depend for its content on the outstanding works of an author named James Hunter. He's the head of J.D. Hunter Association, LLC, which is a leadership training and development organization. Jim's first book, The Servant, A Simple Story About the True Essence of Leadership, enriched my own leadership journey when I read it in 2009. And again recently, while I was preparing for this presentation, I discovered his second book, The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle, How to Become a Servant Leader. Thanks to Mr. Hunter, I am able to offer this incomplete consideration of the principles of servant leadership, all the while hoping that your interest in the topic is stimulated and your willingness to use the principles forthcoming. In the end, it is you who decide the importance and the usefulness of leading as a servant in your own life. I recommend without hesitation that you read James Hunter's books for a more comprehensive consideration of the topic. In part one of my presentation, I summarized what a servant leader should look like, and I attempted to stimulate your appetite for more education about being a servant leader. Today, that is our focus. How do we implement being a servant leader? The world is a very diverse place, and different cultures have very different morals and values that define what is considered right and wrong. Obviously, moral behavior in one society can be viewed as immoral in another. Morality even changes over time within a culture. According to James Hunter, in The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle, How to Become a Servant Leader, he says, ethics, then, can be defined as performing or behaving according to the accepted standards of conduct and becomes a system for applying our morals, values, and our duties. In summary, values, morals, and ethics vary greatly among cultures and over time. Principles, on the other hand, are self-evident. But why are they self-evident? Before answering this question, I will give you a dictionary definition of principles. Principles are comprehensive and fundamental laws. Unlike values, morals, and ethics, which vary greatly between cultures and change over time, principles are unchanging. To use the observation of Cecil B. DeMille, director of the classic movie The Ten Commandments, regarding the principles contained in those great commandments, he said this: "It is impossible for us to break the law. we can only break ourselves against the law. Consider a society in which the opposites of the principles of the Ten Commandments were valued. Imagine a society that valued impatience, incivility, arrogance, selfishness, disrespect, unforgiveness, dishonesty, and little or no discipline at all. Would this be a society worth living in? If one studies the various religions of the world, one inevitably finds basic principles such as integrity, respect for human life, self-control, honesty, courage, commitment, and self-sacrifice. Put another way, by Mr. Hunter, he says, we may disagree from culture to culture about how many wives a man should have, but most everyone agrees that he should not have another man's wife. Indeed, the great religions of the world all support this notion of universal human principles. I ask you now, how do we want to be treated by a leader? Do we want a leader who is kind, humble, respectful, selfless, forgiving, honest, patient, and committed?
We want Hillary.
Of course we do. We want Hillary. Thank you, Abby, for that comment.
She's all of none of that.
Well, according to James Hunter, therein lies the great wisdom of the Golden Rule as it applies to leadership. The Golden Rule of leadership is, be the leader you want your leader to be. Simple, isn't it? So here we are at another disconnect. If we can all agree on generally acceptable principles of human conduct, why do we so often choose to behave contrary to that standard? To understand the answer to this question, we need to explore human nature and our moral sense and our character, which we're going to do for a couple of minutes. When asked during his seminars, Dr. Peck, what is human nature? Dr. M. Scott Peck, who is a best-selling author and psychiatrist, he responds vehemently, human nature is going to the bathroom in your pants. Next question, please. Again, James Hunter helps us to understand Dr. Peck's point. Mr. Hunter says, the glory of being a human being and what separates us from the animal kingdom is that we can teach and discipline ourselves to do what is not natural until it becomes second nature. What is natural about brushing your teeth in the morning? Have you ever observed an animal doing that lately? What is natural about reading and writing, displaying good manners, or extending oneself to others? Indeed, any time we discipline ourselves to do anything, we are doing what is not natural until it becomes second nature. Unlike animals, human beings are not tightly bound by their instinct. Hunter concurs, and he adds this: even the few instincts that some could argue human beings possess, such as survival or procreation, can be transcended, as evidenced by martyrs and celibates. Human beings are endowed with unique capacities like imagination, free will, conscience, and self-awareness. Human beings have the unique ability to ponder their condition and even make change to what comes naturally. Indeed, human beings have the unique ability to choose to be different from their nature. Think of the awesome responsibility of having this freedom to choose. When it comes to the kind of person one is, that person alone is responsible to determine what he or she will become. I repeat that. When it comes to the kind of person one is, that person alone is responsible to determine what he or she will become, what he or she will make out of her or his own life. The potential for good and evil is inherent in all of us. Humans can choose to be good or bad. However, our moral sense of right and wrong competes with other senses, desires and temptations that are just as natural to us. The urgings may include acquiring possessions, accumulating power, indulging in sex without commitment, desiring pleasure, amassing wealth, and many other similar natural desires. How the drama plays out between our moral sense and the way we choose to behave is how our character is formed. In the world's most powerful leadership principle, How to Become a Servant, Hunter summarizes it this way. He says, "There appear to be at least two truths about human nature. One, human beings have a unique capacity to make moral choices about the stimuli that the world throws at them. We have the ability to choose our response. Human beings can choose to be different, to behave contrary to, and to rise above their natural instincts, appetites, and urgings. Human beings can choose to do what is not natural until it becomes second nature. And the second principle, human beings have the capacity for good and evil. However, the tendency toward bad behavior is more the natural state, and it must be resisted. The will to do the right thing is where intentions and actions come together. And this will to do the right thing must be carefully developed and nourished, lest we also become like one of the many nasty beings that roam around our planet." Hunter continues with this. The good news is that there is a set of psychological traits, a moral muscle, if you will, that gives human beings the will and the courage and the strength to do the right thing. This moral muscle, if developed and strengthened over time, enables human beings to put principle ahead of self and to rise above self-interest and immediate gratification. We have a name for this moral muscle. Can any of you think of what it is?
Conscience.
Say again?
The conscience.
Conscience is one possibility.
It's not ethics.
Ethics? That's another possibility. The real word I'm looking for is character. Your moral muscle is your character. Dwight Moody, the 19th century lay evangelist, once remarked, "Character is what a man is in the dark." The word character derives from a Greek verb which means to engrave. Thus, a person's character is the visible sign of his inner nature. A person's character is the visible sign of his inner nature. Character is what we are beneath our personality. I concur with Mr. Hunter and other trainers with whom I have spent time that in healthy human beings, our character should continue to grow and develop throughout life. This is what we mean by maturity. Hunter points out, character is of higher importance than personality, as evidenced by the fact that society does not usually hold people accountable for their personality traits, but certainly does for their behaviors and therefore for their character. Character is our moral maturity, which is our willingness to do the right thing even when it costs us something. Indeed, our true character is revealed when the price of doing the right thing is more than we are willing to pay. Character is our moral and ethical strength to behave according to proper values and proper principles. Character is our level of commitment to do the right thing, which explains why leadership is character in action. Because leaders are expected to do the right thing. There's a saying that you can judge people's character by how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Leadership or character is doing the right thing, especially when you do not feel like doing it. The traits, both good and bad, of which our character is made are influenced, but not determined by heredity and environment. Here we must consider that we all have predisposition and handicaps that can become obstacles to our character development. In the end, what we have become is to a great extent the result of our choices, past and present. On the other hand, our present state need not be the dictator of our future state. We are to let our future character be determined by the choices we make today and tomorrow. It's never too late to choose being someone different. Hunter helps us further to understand what character consists of. He tells us in his second book, character is knowledge of the good, doing the good, and loving the good, the habits of the mind, the habits of the will, and the habits of the heart. We become what we repeatedly do. We become just by doing just acts. We become self-controlled by doing self-controlled acts. And we become brave by doing brave acts. The ancients put it this way: thoughts become actions, actions become habits, habits become our character, and our character becomes our destiny. Seeing yet another way, it is not fate that determines our character. Rather, it's the choices we make that determine our character. In America, we praise talent, and we reward it handsomely. On the other hand, it seems more prudent to me to much more recognize and praise excellence of character than talent. Why, would you ask, would I want to do that? Well, Hunter helps and gives a clear answer. He says, a well-developed character is a unique person forged out of his or her own raw material, however flawed or damaged. Choice by choice, day by day, year by year. A unique person molded through hard work, courage, commitment, and making the right choices even when the choices were difficult or unpopular to be made. Author C.S. Lewis reminds us that is why little decisions you and I make every day are of such infinite importance. The smallest good act today is the capture of a strategic point from which, a few months later, you may be able to go on to victories you never even dreamed of. An apparently trivial indulgence in lust or anger today is the loss of a ridge or railway line or bridgehead from which the enemy may launch an attack otherwise impossible. We are further helped to understand the significance of our choices by two other men. Whitney M. Young Jr., who said this, "The truth is that there is nothing noble in being superior to somebody else. The only real nobility is in being superior to your former self." And Henry David Thoreau said this, "I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by his conscious endeavor." To summarize all these quotes, we are told, advised, to commit ourselves to continuous personal improvement. And by definition, if you do not change, you cannot improve. Undoubtedly, not all change is progress. But guess what? All progress does require you to change. Again, James Hunter reminds us, if we do not believe that people can change, we have no business trying to further develop our leadership skills because this will require us to change. However, embracing change does not come naturally to human beings. Accepting change is actually a learned behavior, which with practice can become second nature. While it surely is not easy, I am sure that it is still possible. How we change is a well-studied process, but one author in particular, Alan Wheelis, who wrote How People Change more than 30 years ago, conceived the following premise in his book. Wheelis believes this, that human change generally flows through 4 stages: suffering, insight, will, and finally, the change itself. When reflecting on my own life, I found these stages were right on target. I'd like to take a few minutes and examine these stages with you. The first stage, suffering, is certainly familiar to all of us. Our encounters with suffering or friction, pain, or discomfort of some sort usually is necessary to get us to move out of our comfort zones. Whether it is desired or not, or whether it is easy or not, suffering is a powerful motivator for change. A vast majority of us need some friction to push us out of the monotonous inertia of our lives and into the change that we need to make. Mr. Hunter offers us examples of frictions applicable to leadership. A boss who demands leadership skills improvement is a friction. Relationship problems can be a friction. Family problems are another form of friction. Our health and problems that relate to it can be frictional. Receiving a 360-degree feedback from our subordinates can be frictional and may even indicate problems in our leadership or in our ability to manage. A divorce can be frictional. Those are just to name a few. Stage 2 of change is insight. Insight includes examining one's behaviors and relational habits and the effect on our relationships. Insight includes concluding personally or getting intellectual agreement of a team that change is possible, provided that you or your team is truly prepared to change and grow. I may be willing to change and I may be striving to get you all to change, but if you are all resisting and saying, no, we're not going to change, my voice is going to be pretty weak in the wind. But if 5 of you come alongside of me, and that leaves 5 others of you against us, then I'm a little bit stronger in my pushing and causing friction, and maybe those other 5 resistors will eventually change as well. Okay. It includes understanding that change is difficult without full commitment and cooperation. Insight includes understanding the great freedom that we have to ponder our conditions, to explore the alternatives to those conditions, and to make the change choices that we need to make. Hunter emphasizes that insight must include hope. Hope, ladies and gentlemen, hope. Hope that comes from understanding and believing that change really can and really does occur regularly in the real world. Alcoholics do get sober. They do. Drug addicts get free of drugs. They do. Criminals even become solid citizens once in a while. Rehab does occur. And prejudiced individuals can learn to accept others more readily. Clearly, all change doesn't end poorly. Now, the third stage of change is exertion of our will. Will can be defined succinctly as this, and this is the formula. Will equals intention plus action. You can have all the intention in the world. If you don't do it, then your will never be carried out. As an organization, as a team, we can have all the dreams we want about reaching 4,500 hours a week. We don't get there if we don't take action and follow through on the commitments we make to do it. As Mr. Hunter has already told us, having knowledge in our head without application is useless. And he adds this: it is of no value to learn what is right and then not to do what is right. What is needed for change is an absolute commitment. This commitment should include the readiness to change and the willingness to make the effort necessary to align your intention with concrete action. It should include the determination to behave differently over and over again until your new habits start to emerge. This brings us to the final stage of change illuminated by Willis and affirmed by Hunter: the act of change itself. It is self-evident to me that when behaviors are practiced consistently over time, real and lasting change occurs. This practice is not without starts and stops. It moves forward and backslides. Doing more and doing less is part of it. I remind you of a point made during part one of my presentation. That is, we live today in a world driven to obtain instant gratification. Because we want it all now, we become more easily discouraged by having to wait for the change, even when we know that the results could be better or best for the situation. The fact is, long-lasting change comes incrementally. And this is true for both good and bad habit formations. To say it like the famous coach John Wooden said it, when you improve a little each day, eventually big things occur. Don't look for the big, quick improvement. Seek the small improvement one day at a time. That's the only way it happens, and when it happens, it will last. In many cases, it is possible after 6 months to begin extinguishing old character habits and to bring new and hopefully more positive responses to the point of being the default response that you have. On the other hand, some of us struggle with certain serious habits for many years. And in cases like these, the sufficiency of support and encouragement is essential to the ultimate change that will occur after the years of suffering and experiencing the friction. I emphasize the need for support is critical for change when there is a lot of resistance to the change and a lot of problems in the persons facing the change. That's why teamship involves an intimate commitment to the care of those around you. On the other hand, because we struggle this way, in my opinion, an observant servant leader will notice this need and will find ample ways to love his colleague forward. You remember the term volitional love, ladies and gentlemen, that I spoke about last time? That's the love I'm referring to here, not the passion of romance, but the volitional love of leadership. You love your colleague forward. He or she will determine ways to encourage self-esteem in the person struggling with change. That's what the servant leader will do. I remind you that human beings are a bundle of habits, good and bad. Habits can be changed, and for the better. But an immense effort and a strong commitment is required for us to complete the race. We can choose to be different than we are today, and it is never too late to learn and to mature. With that said, I will turn now, with Hunter's help, and share a very effective process that can help you in your efforts to change and become a servant leader. Daniel Goleman, a Harvard professor and best-selling author, has written a few books about what he calls emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a broad term encompassing interpersonal skill, motivation, social skill, empathy, and self